You know, another thing we're looking into is the vaccine entry program. Well, do you think you can get a doctor? They'll tell you personally, oh yeah, this is vaccine injury, but they will not write it in a letter, and they will not, because they'll be disciplined. Today, in the summer of 2026 in Canada, can a medical doctor talk about this openly yet? No, they'll be disciplined. So these people are not getting the treatment they need. You know, when your specialist says you need this treatment, well, the provinces won't give it to you, because in our socialist medicine, treatments are approved for certain conditions. And so we're having people die, and we're having people needlessly suffer because we can't have this conversation, because we can't admit we got it wrong, or worse.
Hello and welcome to VSRF Live. I'm Livio Sanchez. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. For years, thousands of Canadians who say they were injured by COVID-19 vaccines have been fighting for recognition, accountability, and answers. Many have shared stories of devastating health complications, financial hardship, and the struggle simply to have their experiences acknowledged. Now, those voices are set to be heard through the Allison Inquiry, a new parliamentary inquiry focused specifically on COVID-19 vaccine injuries. Leading that effort as Inquiry Counsel is Canadian lawyer Shawn Buckley, one of Canada's foremost constitutional and regulatory lawyers, and a longtime advocate for informed consent, civil liberties, and government accountability. Buckley has spent years examining Canada's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and previously served as lead counsel for the National Citizens Inquiry, which took an extensive look at Canada's pandemic response, from lockdowns and business closures to censorship, hospital protocols, and vaccine injuries. The Allison Inquiry is different. Its focus is much narrower. Canadians who report being injured following COVID-19 vaccination. The goal is to hear their testimony and put those experiences before Parliament and the Canadian public. Tonight, Shawn Buckley joins us to explain how the inquiry came together, what it hopes to accomplish, and what Canadians can expect from the proceedings. We'll talk about its scope and limitations, the evidence and testimony that will be heard, and whether this could finally be an important step toward recognition, transparency, and accountability for Canada's vaccine injured. For people who have spent years asking simply to be heard, having their experiences entered into the public record matters. We have a lot to discuss with Shawn tonight, but first, I want to tell you about a really fun way you can support VSRF. We have a great raffle underway featuring VSRF board member Mary Talley Bowden. I'm going to put the graphic up on the screen. One lucky supporter will win the ultimate Mary Talley Bowden package, a full year supply of her all-natural tallow-based Tally Bomb, 2 autographed copies of her new book, Dangerous Misinformation, The Virus, the Treatments, and the Lies, and a private 15-minute Zoom with Dr. Bowden herself. Janet is putting the raffle link in the chat now, so grab your chance to win while supporting VSRF at the same time. The Year of Tally Bomb, 2 signed books, and 15 minutes one-on-one with Dr. Bowden. Good luck. And now I'd like to bring on the founder of the Vaccine Safety Research Foundation, Steve Kirsch. Steve, welcome to VSRF Live. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good, Olivia. It's good to be here. I hear this is a really good show to be on, so I'm pretty excited to be here today.
It is a great show to be on, and I'm excited to have you here, and I'm sure everyone out there watching is excited to have you here. And let's just go ahead and bring on our featured guest for this evening, Shawn Buckley. Shawn, welcome to VSRF Live. How are you this evening?
Well, you know, I'm pretty pleased to be here because I heard this is a great show too.
Well, your presence.
I wonder if we heard from the same person.
Yeah, you know, it could be.
Could be. You know, check your sources.
Before I release you to Steve, Shawn, I want to read your bio for our audience. Shawn is a Canadian lawyer who has been practicing law for over 3 decades with extensive experience in criminal and regulatory law and a particular focus on protecting charter rights and challenging the constitutional validity of legislation. Throughout his career, Shawn has appeared before courts at virtually every level across Canada, including the Supreme Court of Canada. He has also developed extensive expertise in Health Canada litigation and Food and Drugs Act regulation, particularly in cases involving natural health products. He has been called as an expert witness on constitutional law and Food and Drugs Act regulation before committees in both the Canadian Senate and House of Commons, and was invited to draft the Charter of Health Freedom. Of course, many of you will also know Shawn from his work as lead counsel for the National Citizens Inquiry, which examined Canada's broader response to COVID-19 and its impact on Canadians. Now, Shawn is serving as Inquiry Counsel for the Allison Inquiry, a parliamentary inquiry with a much more specific focus, hearing from Canadians who report being vaccine injured following COVID-19 vaccination. Again, thank you for joining us, Shawn. And if you have, we will be having Q&A. So if you have questions for Shawn or Steve, please put your questions all caps in the chat, and I'll get to as many questions as possible. All right, Steve, take it away.
Okay. So before we get into the meat of things, since you're from Canada and I'm not, Helen Grews, have you heard of her and heard of her case? Are you familiar with it?
I know. Yes, I'm very familiar with Helen, and but I didn't follow. It was today, wasn't it? The sentencing.
Oh, was it today?
I think it may have been today, or no?
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, no, I think it is. It's this week.
Oh my gosh! Is it?
So,
well, okay. So, but it's not today, because we're gonna have them on like a couple of days after.
Okay.
The sentences.
For some reason, I thought it was this week, and my wife was talking about her earlier today, so I just assumed that it had happened. But isn't that something? Like her case, it's really not about her. It's to scare all other police officers so that the next time they will not step out of line and do an investigation that is not politically convenient.
Correct.
That's what it's always about.
And it's okay to do any other investigations, but if you're looking into things like the safety of vaccines, you got to get permission first. And that was an unwritten rule that she's been being punished for. She basically didn't follow the unwritten rule.
Yeah, but I mean, in all fairness, I mean, she was just.
You are correct. Her penalty sentencing decision is scheduled for today at 10 a.m. Eastern in Ottawa. It's after that time. So I'm going to have ChatGPT check.
Yeah, and
so you're correct. Good for you.
I'll have to look it up. later too, but I thought it was this week and perhaps today.
Yeah.
So yeah, and she's already been convicted, so this is just a matter of the punishment. So
I just
yeah,
put
that's
it on
right.
the
You know,
screen. There
like
it is.
life in prison, death by firing squad. Okay, she was demoted from first class constable to second class constable for 24 months. So she wasn't fired, she wasn't suspended. She received a 2-year rank demotion, which of course reduces her pay. And her lawyers indicated they intend to appeal. The prosecution had sought a 24-month demotion. So the hearing officer essentially imposed the prosecution's requested penalty. Confirms. Okay, so there you go. We're the first to know. You guys are the first to know. Let's see. So yeah, it said, hey, I can dig into how much money this costs her. So that would be interesting, the financial ramifications. So I'm going to find out how much.
well, I think it also going forward for promotion, that likely it would prevent her, and so it'll affect her pension going forward and things
God,
like that.
this it's so insane. She is being demoted for it's 25,000 a base salary Canadian. Let's see.
And so can I share with your viewers what her heinous crime was? So she's on a special unit.
She investigated a crime without getting permission first.
Well, so she's on a special unit that actually is there to look into basically protecting children. So, and she notices that there is a spike in baby deaths after the vaccine rolls out. And so all she does is she accesses the police records and makes a single phone call to one of the parents.
Who had no problems at all with the phone call, by the way.
So
the parent didn't object to the call at all.
Not at all. And so if this was in any other context, so, some armed robbery or a sex crime or murder, is it possible that you would get investigated, let alone, demoted for 2 years? No, because that's not what it's about. It's about teaching officers that you cannot question vaccines and you cannot question public health. And this vaccine thing, can I share with you something that's really troubling that's come out of this inquiry? So we're preparing witnesses, and I'm not involved in the funneling. I get at the bottom of the funnel those that are shortlisted, and then I interview them, and kind of I'm the final yay or nay. Am I going to call them as a witness? There may be one that hasn't said this either in writing in their application form or personally, but I'm talking to people. They're in a wheelchair. They're 30 years old and they need a kidney transplant because their kidneys were destroyed by the vaccine. They're in chronic pain. Their lives are absolutely destroyed. And basically every single one of them during the interview tells me, but I'm not an anti-vaxxer. Well, what are you talking about? You're not an anti-vaxxer. But what they're afraid of is they are so gaslit by the medical community. I mean, they're horribly injured, but in Canada, the doctors, they cannot diagnose you as vaccine injury, or they can't treat you if you have been diagnosed. It's like you're a modern day leper, right? Like there's some cases where it's very clear, like right out of the gate, the doctors say this is a vaccine injury, but you can't get a specialist to help you. And what I find so bizarre is, so we're so afraid of being an anti-vaxxer. Well, Steve, what's a vaxxer? Like I guess, because I don't even, anti is opposite of vaxxer. So what on earth is a vaxxer?
Those are the, Shawn, those are the mainstream people who believe in vaccines. For its religion. They're the members of the Church of Vaccinology.
It's interesting how we don't see things. Like in my personal life, my family, we had a vaccine scare long before COVID. Like my kids are all adults now, but I had 3, and my first one, like I knew nothing about this, just, whenever they were supposed to be, he was supposed to be vaccinated, he was vaccinated. And then my middle one, this is before she gets into elementary school because she's getting vaccinated at the doctor's office. And she just basically goes to do an anaphylactic shock and has to be revived. So it was the doctor that told us, like my wife and I, we weren't saying, let's not get our kids vaccinated. The doctor says, you have to stop vaccinating your kids. You guys are sensitive. And so that ended it. But I mean, public health just hounds you. Like they phone you 24 hours a day. It's like they park a car across the street and they can't, rest until you consent to your child being vaccinated, even though your doctor said, no way. And then somebody shared with me the way to get them to stop calling. And I'm ashamed to say I used this, but I hadn't even thought of what it meant. And how you get them in Canada to stop calling is when they call and say, well, you got to get your kid vaccinated. You say, well, okay, for which vaccine? And please just send me the double-blind study showing that it's safe and effective. And then the calls drop like about 90%. It works like magic. But I didn't, I was still totally asleep. I didn't actually think that through. Well, wait a second. Why would that get them to stop calling? It probably was another 10 or 15 years before I learned there are none. So is a vaxxer somebody that thinks it's okay to jab children with vaccines that have not gone through the gold standard double-blind clinical trials? Like,
Correct.
Is that what a vaxxer is?
Yeah, because everybody knows they're safe and effective. That's what they're taught in medical school. Do not question the authorities, Shawn, because the health authorities are always right. And whatever you do not ask for any data.
No,
we keep that hidden from view, so to protect the public, and we don't want to privacy. There'd be privacy issues if they release the data, like if a 2-year-old died 2 days after a shot. I mean, you would immediately be able to identify the 2-year-old, and that would immediately invade the 2-year-old's privacy, and we can't have that. Right. So if every 2-year-old was dying like 2 minutes after their shot, got to keep that confidential because we can't reveal publicly, the private health information.
Well,
that's the
you can't make this stuff up. And at what point though, it has to break, because the countries are divided. I mean, I'm from Canada, but it's the same in the US. In last September, Rasmussen did a poll in the US where they asked Americans questions, and they found that 56.6% of people in the United States believe that the COVID-19 vaccines caused, and the words are important here, serious death. So not death, not like, Aunt May's sister's gardener died, serious death. Well, that's well over half of Americans believe these vaccines cause serious death. Well, what's the percentage that believe that it caused serious harm, let alone death, right? It's got to be a pretty sizable majority. So how long can you kick this can down the road where the majority of Americans believe that this intervention, to be as charitable as possible, was absolutely reckless and destructive? And yet we can't have an honest conversation about it. No, I mean, being charitable, reckless, and destructive.
Right. Yeah. So I think the answer to that is possibly decades. Smoking and lung cancer, so. that was pretty clear. And it took 40 years for that to be recognized. Also,
there wasn't so much death and destruction, right?
I don't know. I think smoking is pretty bad, but maybe with social media and the internet, that we can spread the word more quickly. Clearly, I was just reading a story today in my newspaper saying, "Oh my gosh, the childhood vaccination rates have dropped. Kids are not getting vaccinated as much as they used to be." Oh my word. People are waking up.
Well, there's a loss of public trust, and that's the problem. Is the only way to restore that is to have this conversation they won't have. I mean, in a way, it's just desserts. You force everyone to get an intervention. It doesn't go well, and then all of a sudden, nobody's interested in that intervention.
Well, and if they hear about it, but they'll be gaslit into believing that, oh, that's just a coincidence. And so are there any public officials in Canada telling the truth? Can you name a public official anywhere in Canada, elected official in Canada, who tells the truth about the vaccine? Sort of the Ron Johnson of Canada.
Okay, well, that's what we're trying to do here, Steve. So, if I can tell you about the Allison Inquiry then. So, and even I think it's going to break the narrative, but no, we don't have a Ron Johnson in Canada. And, I'm thankful for Ron Johnson. I mean, I think the whole world is watching Fauci in front of the Senate. And, don't ask me any more questions because on the advice of counsel, so no, it's just amazing.
As a lawyer, you must appreciate that, but you're not.
We don't have the fifth. We don't have the fifth. So in Canada, it's just a philosophical difference. So from a policy perspective, you are immune whenever you're compelled to testify under oath. You are immune for everything you say except lying while you're there. And the rationale is well, we want to find out what happened. So, it can't be used against you unless the trial is against you. But if you're called as just a witness, you're not basically under trial yourself. You have to answer questions. There is no fifth. You can't plead the fifth. A court can basically imprison you for contempt until you're willing to talk. And again, the rationale just simply is it's more important for somebody to be able to speak so the court can find out what's going on, as opposed to, but it's just a different policy decision that was made. So we don't have the fifth. We have to answer questions.
So there are no public officials, basically like a Ron Johnson. Zero.
No, zero. Zero. There was nobody at all. And what I've learned.
Well, it's not like the U.S. has a plethora of honest politicians, right? I mean, we've got a couple, Rand Paul, and Ron Johnson.
Well, it goes deeper than that, because you're using terms of honesty here. Before this Allison Inquiry, before it was even feasible to go ahead with it, I'm having to meet with a whole bunch of members of parliament. That's what it would be the equivalent of your congressman. So I was meeting with them to see, would it be possible for you to sit on this inquiry? It's nonpartisan. It's just listening to vaccine-injured persons. Would it be possible? So I'm having to meet with all these members of parliament, and I came to understand that I live in a bubble and they live in a different bubble. Like, I mean, I know all things COVID, and for years, eat, breathe, drink COVID. You say PCR test, you say dying with COVID, not of COVID. I know exactly what you're talking about. These people know none of this. Like, so our members of parliament, and for sure it'll be the same for a large number of your congressmen and a large number of US senators, will actually honestly believe the mainstream narrative. And this is really important. This is important because in the freedom movement in Canada, everyone's all angry at Parliament. Like, why aren't you doing something? Why aren't you ending this? Why are we still jabbing kids? When will there be justice for what happened? Well, if you believe the vaccines worked, and you understand that there's people really hurt around you, there's people who have died, there's people disabled, but if you honestly believe that's caused by long COVID, because that's what you're being told, and thank goodness for the vaccine, or there would have been more injuries, but it prevented long COVID, then there's no problem for you to solve. There's no inquiry for you to have. So I think it's important for us to understand that a lot of these people are totally captured still in the lie. So the question is how do we break that capture that the mainstream media has over them? But many of them are acting, you see, again, if you live in that bubble, it's reasonable to do what you're doing, and it explains a lot of their actions. And I was surprised. Like I am genuinely surprised that that bubble exists, and that most of, our politicians federally in Canada actually believe this stuff. Like, what is the citizen? How do you get out of that box?
Well, and that's the key, is how do you break the hypnosis or whatever spell that these people are under? Like if you had a pin, you could prick the balloon that these people are surrounded with. It's almost like the Get Smart, the cone of silence.
Oh yeah,
And
no, I love that show.
Yeah, you remember the cone of silence, right?
I sure do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be human nature. Like, remember during COVID, how afraid we were, and like most people just go along with things. But how afraid we were to talk out, because you'd be ridiculed and shut down right away. If you posted something on social media, the mob would just be totally after you. But now we're the majority. So why don't we start speaking out? Why don't we start, just saying, I'm not going to be quiet anymore. I'm not going to pretend.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think I'm going to do that starting today on X.
Yeah, I'm not talking about you.
It's like, no, I know, but like the problem is that we're all preaching to our audiences, and you can't reach the other side, because they're either the trolls that are out to get you and call you a moron and stupid and all this, or they're people who are in the middle, but those people aren't listening to you. So, well, you got to bridge the divide.
Okay. So thank the Lord here, what's happening in Canada. So we decide, like, we get one MP, a single MP, Dean Allison, who decides that he's supposed to listen to vaccine injured Canadians. And in Canada, like, there's no budget. I assume Senator Johnson and that they've got a budget to do that. So there's no money. He can use an official committee room and the AV services. So we don't have to worry about that. But as far as getting witnesses there and the website and organization, we're really just crowd fundraising, as crazy as that is. And he didn't know if he was going to get kicked out of his party for doing this. And he didn't know if the media would go after him. But we, on June 4th, we're in the Parliamentary Press Gallery. We announce ourselves. And I'm going to use some numbers, but you have to understand that there's 400 million Americans. There's only 40 million Canadians. So multiply these numbers by 10 for that to be meaningful.
Sure. Okay.
But so MP Dean Allison, after the press conference, announcing that all we're doing is we're going to hold an inquiry for 4 days, listening to vaccine injured Canadians tell their stories to members of Parliament. He does 2 Facebook posts. Now that's the left wing. In 24 hours, he gets over 1 million views. So
a million views.
And these are people that they're not in our narrative. They're in this other sandbox. And an entire conversation has come up. Like, MPs are now, like, Dean's getting calls like, oh, I've got stage 3 cancer. Could it be vaccine injury? Like, so it's a new idea.
Right. Does he regret now opening up Pandora's box here?
Well, I think it's too soon to tell. But, if you look at him on social media, he's just a lion out there. He's taking no prisoners. Right? Like, I mean, he's taking absolutely no prisoners on this. And I think that's how we have to approach it. But another thing that's happened is so we hold a second press conference, and we have a vaccine injured lady named Michelle Wharton, who basically, I mean, it was hard not to get to tears and weep listening to her share, in this press conference. And Juno News did a 3-minute clip of her, which just, I think it got like 1.6 million. So times that by 10 if you're in the United States. Like, it trended, and that was just that one clip of her. There were others. And a lot of the negative comments were things like, well, I don't believe it's vaccine injury. Like, not necessarily attacking her in the inquiry. Well, that's the first step. Like, imagine, Steve, because remember, we live in a bubble. So imagine that the truth is that actually, the vaccines did cause harm, but it's way less than we thought. Like they just turned out to be quite benign, actually. And it really is long COVID. Like if that was the truth and that started getting introduced to me, my first response would be, I don't believe it. Right? Like that would be my first response. Well, that's what these people are experiencing. The idea is being introduced to them and they're saying, I don't believe it. And so I think we're starting that dialogue already.
And how many people are coming? Have they actually had any hearings in the legislature? No. When does that happen?
We run for 4 days, September 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th.
Okay, so is anybody going to show up on the lawmaker side? I know that people will show up to complain, but will there be anyone actually listening?
Yeah, so any other members of parliament? Well, this is the beautiful thing. So in Canada, like you guys you have two parties, Democrats and Republicans. We've got two main parties. Yeah, well, exactly. If there's really only one party with two branches, but I digress. We've got really four parties, two major ones and two minor ones. We've structured this so it's completely nonpartisan. It's open to everyone. For sure, we are going to have members of parliament from the Conservative Party, which would be akin to your Republican Party, show up. Will we have some from the other parties? I don't know, but we know we know all the policy wonks are going to be watching. We know that some parliamentary aides are going to be showing up to see what's happening. So, Steve, I actually believe that the other side is going to be watching this, whether or not they attend, because it's exploded too much. It's Dean Allison, doesn't like he's an opposition member. He doesn't hold an important position. His social media right now is exceeding the prime minister's. It's exceeding anyone in parliament. It may be exceeding, almost all of them combined.
Because he's looking into this issue.
This issue's exploded. Just like it's exploding in the United States with these Senate hearings. Like, how long is it going to be, where people realize, wait, I was lied to about, gain of function. I was lied to that we got this from Chinese people eating bats, and other things before you start questioning it all.
Well, Shawn, we're 5 years down the road with this. We're more than 5 years down the road. And nobody there is no Ron Johnson, not a single Ron Johnson. And, I mean, it's sad that in the US there's Ron Johnson, right? And it's like the numbers are tiny in our after all this time, after 5 years, to not have more support. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, well, it is. And I mean, Ron Johnson out there is really a David fighting Goliath, except that more and more people are coming to see truth through what he's doing, right?
Sure,
and
of course. But the problem is his colleagues are not going along with the with the truth.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think this is going to be
except for Rand Paul.
This has to be settled with this, the citizens basically not complying anymore. So, and I think that the pharmaceutical influence is deeper than any of us think, because there's no other issue that they're so invested in the message, and it can't just be money. Like it doesn't. We'd all agree to give them money, like inject our kids with things that, like with saline, like we wouldn't care about that. So
what's it gonna take? What is it going to take? Like the Fauci diaries come out, and my daughter, who one of my daughters, who thinks I'm wrong, now is like, oh wow, guess we were fooled. I guess maybe Dad might be right, but she still hasn't come to terms with that, even when the icon is toppled, and you can see that he's basically two-faced. He's
Mhm.
talks about one thing, and privately he's like saying, yeah, it's the opposite, but we're lying to the public. It's, and even then I still don't get it. Hey, Dad, you were right.
Well, I don't think kids are capable of saying those words to a parent, are they?
Yeah. Man, it
So,
could
like,
be.
don't ask for too much here. But
Yeah,
it sounds
well,
like things have started. I mean, it's almost like there's been a spell, and I think it's just the propaganda machine has been running before you and I were born on these vaccine things. I mean, you and I, Steve, were vaccinated as kids, not as much as they are today, but we were, and nobody questioned it, and it's just been going on for so long. And
yeah, I mean, I didn't question it until I was like 65 years old, and after the COVID shots, and people started dying around me, and I was like, what's going on here? Like, why is this happening?
Mhm.
And started looking into the data, but most people wouldn't do that. They just say, oh, 6 people, 6 of my closest friends died last week. Weird. Wonder what caused that. Right? They're not going to go dig into look at data sets.
No, they're not. But
And there's nobody telling them on CNN that you were misled.
no. But does
Right.
anyone watch CNN?
Yeah, people do.
Like
No, but CNN's kind of reflective of, it's sort of the mirror of Congress and the state of mind in Congress. Like, if you can change CNN, then these people in Congress that claim, vaccines don't cause autism, vaccines are safe, we've got to vaccinate our kids, we've got to have vaccine mandates, all of that stuff can start to change.
Mhm.
But you've got this whole giant infrastructure of people who are clueless and who have the credentials and who are claiming that vaccines, the COVID vaccine has saved millions of lives. Yeah, in modeling studies they have, but not in real life. Yeah, and I pointed out to, I won't say who it is, but the very well respected journalist, a podcaster on our side. And I pointed out that, hey, if you look at the cumulative deaths in the Our World in Data, you'll see that the slope goes up for a while and it stays kind of like at a 45-degree angle, and then it flatlines. And I said, that's the knee of the curve. But the problem is that the knee happens in April of 2022, well after the vaccines have rolled out. And if the vaccines worked, you would have seen a flatlining of the mortality, the cumulative mortality curve. You would have seen that flatline as soon as the vaccine started rolling out, and then it would, turn and turn and turn. And then after, say, mid-year 2021, it would then just go off at whatever rate it fell to. No such thing happened. There was no change at all.
In fact, your point on all-cause mortality, because you can't fake deaths, right? You can say that a motorcycle death or somebody jumping off a bridge is COVID, but you can't fake deaths. So the total number of deaths is fairly stable for most countries. And when COVID, it swept across the world, we have no vaccine to protect us. We have no natural immunity. If it was truly dangerous, that's when we should have been dropping by like flies, and we don't. It's like no worse than a bad flu season. Like, it's not a bump at all until the vaccines hit. And my understanding is all-cause mortality, the base rate is now a little higher in pretty well every Western country.
So that's an interesting observation. I'm going to have to go check that out because I haven't looked specifically at that. But I know in the U.S. I've seen the baseline curves go from one level, right? Because there's fluctuation
Mhm.
due to seasonality every year, right? Goes up, it goes down, goes up,
And
goes
year
down.
to year, there can be, you can have a worse
Right,
year. You can
right,
have a
right.
bad
Yeah,
flu
yeah.
season or
And
something
so,
else.
once the shots go roll out, but also it happened with COVID as well. So that makes it hard to disentangle. Is that the peaks are higher and the troughs are higher too. So if you think of a sine wave, what you're doing is you're essentially displacing the sine wave upwards by a certain amount, and that's clear from the U.S. data. And so what you have a problem though is attribution. Was that due to COVID or was that due to the COVID vaccine? Because both of them sort of came around the
Or
same time.
or due to government intervention. Have you ever had Denis Rancourt on your show?
No, I don't
Yes,
think we have.
Yes, we have.
We have? Oh,
Okay. Yeah, you should.
yeah, maybe what, like once or twice or
Once.
yeah.
Yeah, because
okay.
he's an expert
A while
on
ago.
this all-cause mortality, and he's still at it. Like as the data comes out, he's got an entire team working on it.
Yep.
And I mean, you might have one state that has a bump in mortality, and the state next door doesn't. And the only difference is government action, not COVID. It's not like COVID's going to stop at a state border. That's ridiculous. So it's not just the vaccine, it's also government action, because if you start isolating people and scaring them, and especially the elderly and vulnerable, they die, and they die in larger numbers. And in the province I'm in, that when they shut down the oil patch, we had a whole bunch of young men suicide and overdose. And so there's a viewable spike in the province of Alberta among young men, and it was neither COVID nor the vaccine, it was government action.
Yep, totally. Well, there's a great paper in the British Medical Journal by Saskia Mostert. And the Mostert paper was just revoked by the British Medical Journal because they thought the discussion section was imbalanced. Spent too much time blaming the vaccines. And so for that, you get your paper retracted in violation of the COPE guidelines. COPE guidelines be damned. We're just going to do an unethical retraction because we think your discussion section was imbalanced, and we're not going to give you an opportunity to correct your paper. We're just going to retract it.
But isn't that
That's
just code
pretty
for
stunning.
we need pharmaceutical company funding? Like, isn't that really what they're saying?
It is not. That is not how science is supposed to work. The COPE guidelines specify the conditions under which a paper may be retracted. This paper met none of those standards and was retracted for completely bogus reasons. And I wrote to them, and I bet I don't hear back.
But that's just our problem, isn't it? Is that there's no accountability. So that will happen.
There is no accountability.
There will be no accountability to them, so they can do it again and again and again. And basically
Absolutely.
in every area. And I mean, why don't academics say, I'm not going to publish in this? And why don't they get outraged over this? We allow this to happen. And so we're just now so corrupt that we can't, like, what can we rely on to act the way it's supposed to act? What institution?
Yep. I'm just I was looking for a response from them, but I do see an email from Peter Getch saying, "Dear all, I had no knowledge of this before I got Steve's email this morning. I am totally appalled. I've written a lot about censorship, particularly in my freely available book, blah, blah, blah. And will very likely write an article for my Substack based on the comments in the attached document. Please read it and give you feedback, blah, blah, blah." So it is, yeah, I mean, people are just appalled. And so he attached a Word document here for me to read about this. Boy, it's so horrible what these journals are doing. and it just reinforces this, right? People read the journals, doctors trust the journals are not trustable. It's a whole cycle. It feeds on itself, and it seems impenetrable to try to get anybody. Like, have you ever changed a doctor's mind, Shawn? Talking to a doctor, for example, have you ever been, with all of the facts that you have you been able to change any doctor's mind who was saying, oh, vaccines are safe and effective? And because the hard part is getting them to even listen to you, right? Because they'll refuse to meet with you, refuse to hear you. You're an anti-vaxxer, don't want to hear it. You don't believe in science. Like, I'm not going to waste my time. And even when you do get into a discussion with these guys, which I have, this Dr. Nino on X, I've got a long DM thread with him. It's like talking to a wall. It's like he basically thinks that I am the person who is not listening to science and is not evaluating the evidence correctly.
Well, now, does he
and so
think
he thinks I'm just as bad, that I think about him the same as he thinks about me, right? And there's no bridging that gap. There's no way to bring these sides together. I make all these arguments and he keeps discounting them. And I'll show him, look, the AI analysis, the unbiased AI analysis shows this, and he'll go to Grok and say, Grok, tell Steve how he's wrong. It's never ending.
But I wonder if part of it, like, all of us, we get entrenched and we know that they've been indoctrinated on the vaccine issue, and it's very difficult to change minds. But, they're also trapped. Like, a doctor can't come out against the vaccines. They will be shunned by their colleagues.
Well, Charles Hoff, you want to talk about that video? Did you help make that video?
Well,
or help put that,
I was at the press conference, and it was, my wife and I that invited him to participate in the press conference. So
yeah, he was awesome.
He was absolutely awesome.
Yeah, he talked about all of his patients who are now injured. It's never happened before. Clearly was the vaccine. He reported them and got all of his reports deleted and was told that the vaccines are safe and effective and to shut up, or we'll take away your license.
I think I have that video.
Let's watch it. It's
yeah.
I think this is Charles Hoff. Let me play it and you'll let me know if it's him.
When the vaccine rollout began, I tried to alert my colleagues in the area to serious safety signals and was reprimanded by the authorities and told that I was not allowed to say anything negative about the vaccines. And so when I started to see very serious side effects in my own patients, within 3 months of the onset of the vaccine rollout, I had one patient who died suddenly after his shot. I had 3 people who were clearly going to be permanently disabled and a number of others who were seriously injured. So I sent an open letter to the British Columbia Public Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, to inform her of these safety signals. Her response was to refer this to her top vaccine safety specialist, Dr. Monica Naus, who assured me without any investigation of any of my patients that these were all coincidences. So I said, I said to her, I've been family doctor to these people for 28 years. I know them very well, and there is no other medical explanation for these terrible, disabling symptoms that they have. She insisted that they were all coincidences and told me to just submit vaccine injury reports. So I started submitting the reports, and ultimately I submitted 14 in total. And when every single one was denied as a coincidence by public health, I gave up. To this day, I have 36 vaccine injured patients. This is just the COVID vaccines I'm talking about in my practice. And I have a small one-man practice of approximately 1,100 people.
Is that Dr. Hoff?
That is Dr. Hoff. He is an absolute hero.
And so when other doctors see this, does it encourage them to speak out, or they just same deer in headlights and don't want to talk about it.
Well, I mean, what happened with Dr. Hoff is, so, he sends this letter to Dr. Bonnie Henry. It's a public letter. He gets disciplined by the College of Physicians and Surgeons that go after him. And what you didn't see in this clip, because he talks about it, is they finally back down. They drop the charges against him, but they tell him why they're dropping the charges. And why they dropped the charges after several years of just terrorizing him was that the charges have already accomplished the purpose of discouraging other doctors from promoting misinformation. So
basically no one's going to follow his lead.
Exactly. Well, they make it, I mean, we were talking about Constable Bruce. I mean, you make an example out of one. They made an example out of Dr. Charles Hoff. They made an example of other doctors in Canada that stood up. Most of them lost their licenses to practice. He may be the only one that didn't lose his license to practice, or at least have restrictions put on his practice.
And no one has any other doctors come up before him, or is it they're just canceled, lose their license, and the example set, basically?
Yeah, well, I mean, isn't it our problem is people don't stand up for what's right? Like, what if the doctors had said no during COVID? What if the nurses had said no? Even at a couple of hospitals, couldn't that have changed everything?
Yes.
It could have. It could
the
have.
problem
And
is it
that's what's
changes
so
everything.
frustrating.
Right.
I mean, I live in
But the thing is,
that jails pastors. I think we jailed more pastors than anywhere else. Like, what if the churches had said, no, we're all opening?
Yeah. And I'm curious if patients of other doctors, like, are people seeing this video of Dr. Hoff and other patients who have been gaslit into thinking it's long COVID or any other injury? You would imagine that they might start calling their doctors and going, hey, what I've got sounds like what this doctor's seeing in his practice.
Yep. Yeah. But the problem is that they haven't seen that video.
Right.
Well, except like I say, so the 3-minute version of that, Juno News, went to like 1.6 million the last time I checked. So times that by 10, because the United States is 10 times larger. And
Yeah, so that's
the
good.
clip you were showing was from a different news outlet, Rebel News. So, I mean, it is trending. This is the interesting thing is no one was talking about vaccine injury in Canada, even the freedom groups. It was a dead issue. And, we're also having basically our land rights being taken away, which is, distracting us as we slide into communism. So no one was talking about it. And now all of a sudden, everyone's talking about it. So, I mean, I don't know if this is going to be it, what allows us to finally have the conversation or not. But it has brought vaccine injury to the forefront where it was buried.
Indeed. Good. It's a good thing. How
Steve,
are we
do you
doing
have
on
more questions for
audience
Shawn?
questions?
Yeah, I've got several questions, so why don't I just jump right in?
Go for
Dr. Laura asks, for Shawn, how did Canada get this investigation in the first place? I do not know the backstory.
Yeah, okay. So the backstory is last year, my wife Teresa and I, for the Natural Product Protection Association, we had the 3rd largest paper petition in Canadian history, basically just calling for this health charter which entrenches health rights, basic health rights. And we drive this petition across Canada, holding live events all along the way. And we're dropping them off to an MP on Parliament Hill on October 23rd so that they can be entered into Parliament. And a friend says, you need to stay for a couple more days and meet this MP, Dean Allison. So we meet with him, and we all get along quite fine. And he says to us, I've been thinking about holding an inquiry just to listen to vaccine injured Canadians. Well, my wife Teresa was the main organizer for the National Citizens Inquiry. Like, she's just one of these people that can do large events. And then, I was lead counsel on that. Well, we said, if you decide to do this, then we may be willing to help you. So that was just it. And then a couple of months later, Teresa felt prompting to contact Dean, and we started a dialogue. And we're back and forth. I remember, we had one Zoom meeting with one of his chiefs of staff who just thought this was a horrible idea. And it didn't really look like it was going to go anywhere. He's thinking he's going to be kicked out of his party, his caucus. He thinks the mainstream media is just going to annihilate him and make him look like a monkey. And he thinks that no other MP is going to show up. And I remember having this phone call, my wife Teresa and him and I, and he's giving us all these reasons why he can't do it. And I'm a Christian, he's a Christian, so you can say what I said to him. As I said, don't tell me why you can't do it, because that's then focusing on the wrong thing. The only issue is are you supposed to be doing this? Is this what God wants you to do? So I said, let's end the call. You pray about that, you answer that question, and you get back to me. So Teresa and I just think it's done. We actually think we're going to have a summer, because a project like this, it's just dusk to dawn, 6 days a week, right? So we think it's done. And then 10 days later, he gets hold of us and says, regardless of the consequences, which is this was a real character indication. He said, regardless of the consequences, I feel I'm supposed to go ahead with this. So regardless of whether I get kicked out of my party, he's been a member of the Conservative caucus for 22 years. Regardless of whether I get totally roasted by the media, I'm in. So, we meet with him and his wife a week later, and all four of us are on side. We just decided to go ahead. And so we just started planning it. I mean, there's MPs get no funding, members of parliament get no funding for this type of thing. So we had to create a not-for-profit and call out for funds and start organizing. We're all volunteers. So I'm a volunteer. My wife Teresa is a volunteer. The people sorting the witnesses are volunteer. The people that are going to run the event are volunteers. We have to pay for website and social media people, and we have to pay for travel and venues and stuff like that. But so that's how it's come together. And Dr. Laura, good to hear from you.
So let me interject a question. Since you're a lawyer and you're in Canada, there's a guy named Dan Hartman who is
I know Dan.
He's trying to fight for justice for his son Shawn, 17 years old, who was injured and was killed 33 days after receiving a Pfizer vaccine.
Yeah, he had a heart attack, and he didn't die in bed. He must have realized what was going on and tried to get up to get help, and he died. 17 years old, hockey player. Dan is going to be testifying at the Allison Inquiry.
So my question is, what do you think of Dan's lawsuit, and do you think he will be successful?
Well, no, this is interesting. So 2 courts now. So Dan, was suing Health Canada. And you guys have emergency authorization. We just changed the law so that they could approve this without even getting safety data. You didn't have to prove it was safe. You didn't have to prove it was effective. You didn't have to prove anything. In my opinion, it's in the very least, criminal negligence causing death, if not culpable homicide. But that's just my opinion. Who am I? Except that,
Yeah. What do you know?
30 years experience.
You're not. Yeah, you're not. But are you a criminal attorney?
Oh yeah, I've probably run 1,000 criminal trials, because that's where the Constitution is used.
Okay.
So it's used in criminal and it's used in health rights. Are the 2 main areas. Okay, so that's where I practice. But back to Dan. The lawsuit.
Yeah, where do you think this is going? Is this lawsuit going to be successful, or is this lawsuit going to be shot down?
Well, here's the scary part. So he was suing Health Canada as one of the defendants. He's also suing the pharmaceutical company. But 2 courts have said that Health Canada does not owe individuals a duty of care. So basically, Health Canada could be completely negligent. They could be committing culpable homicide, but they didn't owe Shawn Hartman a duty of care. Rather, their duty of care is to the public good, the public at large. Now, this is communism, right? The only way you have a free society is if individuals have rights. But we've moved, and it's not just in this area, and you guys have done it too. It's no, the greater good on these health emergencies trumps everything else. No.
Right. So no, it's okay for Shawn to
get safe.
Well, so their argument is that, Shawn was unfortunately a sacrifice for the greater good. His death saved hundreds of lives. Is that how the logic works?
That's not how they're phrasing it, but that's the logic. Is he's an acceptable sacrifice for the greater good. And that's scary, because then the government can, and we're just talking.
This is using kids as human shields.
Not just kids, but, so the government gets to decide who lives and who dies. And they don't, the problem is that they shouldn't
don't
have to
kill kids. Yeah, that's insane. Like you can't get any of these people on camera to confront them with any of this, right? Like, have you ever been able to, in your COVID inquiry, get any of the officials to testify and ask them questions?
No, because we didn't have subpoena power. Now, we would invite them all, and Steve Nunn would. And I mean, you
none, zero.
You had long ago, you had even posted a big sum of money to do a debate, didn't you? Did anyone ever take you up on that?
$1 million. No takers.
No takers.
Yeah, but I offered the $1 million unconditionally to people on the committee.
Mm-hmm.
No response. Think about that. You're given $1 million to have a 4-hour conversation, and you turn it down. What does that tell you? It tells you that these people don't want to talk. They don't want to answer any questions. And that was the whole point of the offer. I didn't even have to have $1 million. I did, but I knew my $1 million was safe because I knew none of these people wanted to be on camera and answer any questions. So I could have offered $10 million.
Mm-hmm.
Would have been the same response. Man, maybe somebody might have taken 10 million, but for $1 million for 4 hours, like, you'd have to be insane. This isn't a $1 million bet. This is, I give you $1 million to talk to me for 4 hours, and you turn it down. Like, who's going to do that? That should have woken up like everybody. Like,
I thought it was brilliant.
These people don't want to talk, do they?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't want to talk, you got something to hide. And that was the whole point of the offer.
They got something to hide. They don't want to talk.
Yeah, it was, the money is just a way to call attention to the fact that these people don't want to talk about it. And they'll make any excuse in the world. And the whole point of the $1 million was to remove all possible excuses. And as you can see, there were no takers. Man.
Yeah, it speaks volumes. If we ever can kind of cross that line where we can accept that we've made this huge error and then start deconstructing it and making sure it doesn't happen again. The stories, that we could hear from the other side. I mean, it could just be the movies that could be made and the books that could be written, I think, are going to be absolutely fantastic.
Oh. Absolutely. Shawn, I have a question from Lisa. How does the Allison Inquiry differ from the extensive National Citizens Inquiry? And do you expect this to have a greater impact in terms of policies supporting the vaccine injured?
That is a great question. That is the same question.
Yeah. So, it's funny because my wife and I were the main organizers for the NCI, and I called over half of the 405 witnesses that we called and interviewed the other ones and parceled them out to lawyers. And the NCI did have an effect. And I don't think we're finished with that testimony, because we started in February 2023. Like, Canada had been locked down for 2 winters. And then we have the truckers convoy, and that scared the government. So they didn't lock us down that winter. And so the NCI jumps in and we do this. Now, what was interesting is we had witnesses dropping out like flies. Like so many people wanted to testify. Basically, it was like winning a lottery to get a slot. But even then, like on the day of testimony or the day before, we'd have people drop out because they were afraid. They were afraid of losing their jobs. They were afraid of their families, basically disowning them. They were afraid of other things. We're experiencing the same thing with the Allison Inquiry 5 years later. Most of it is fear that the family is going to totally disown them by bringing this up again, like this tension. You can't, even within families, you can't tolerate people suggesting that they're injured by a vaccine. But we've had some people worried that they would lose their government benefits. And remember, the government seized bank accounts here for people that donated to the truckers. So this is a realistic concern. So it's interesting, the fear is still there. I think the difference here is MPs weren't watching us, and the policy wonks of the federal parties weren't watching us. And on this one, we are going to have MPs at the table. Now, they may all be conservative MPs, they may not, but every party is going to be watching this, and the mainstream media will be in attendance. They're already reporting on us. I mean, they're trying to slam us, but they'd never reported on the National Citizens Inquiry. So I think what's happened is this has so ignited a conversation. I think it's all God. I mean, I think he's just forcing a conversation, and they can't deny it. And so what's going to happen when vaccine injured Canadians just start telling their stories? Because there's just something about people telling their stories. And that was the strength of the NCI. And that would be the strength here. But people are more hungry to tell their stories. At the NCI, we announced, I don't know, maybe 4 months before we started hearings in February. And then we ran for 3 months. Like we were in 8 cities, 3 days each city. We went for months. We had 802 people apply to be witnesses on all issues, not just vaccine injury, but economic, education, experts. No, this is lay witnesses. We at the Allison Inquiry, just on vaccine injury, we're well over 1,000 now. People applying, and then it's
That's awesome.
So they're desperate to speak, and we don't have the funding to pay most of them. Like some people have said, I'll pay for a flight or stuff like I'll volunteer to pay for a flight so a witness can get there. Most of these people, and they've been destroyed economically, they're finding a way to get there on their own. One guy who's in a wheelchair, he's almost a quadriplegic, but he can move his arm enough that he can do the joystick on his power wheelchair. He's doing crowdfunding, and he's got a buddy flying from Victoria. He's now chartered this little, handicap bus, and then he contacts us and says, this is what I'm doing. If anyone else in the area needs a ride. Well, it turns out some other witness was having problems because he's in a wheelchair, but he also has got this big IV pole that he's got to travel with, and he couldn't get. So now, the one Michael, he's going to be picking him up and dropping them off at the venue. It's a beautiful thing, but they're desperate to testify because the medical system will not hear them. If I can just, share something else that just illustrates this. I'm interviewing them this Michael, he's a quadriplegic, and, I'm interviewing it like another guy, he's like 30 and he's lost his kidney and he's waiting on a kidney transplant, or, chronic pain, and I'm blind, and all these horrific things. Well, I've added a question. I'm asking every one of this question. So what's the worst part? I've interviewed you. What's the worst part? And I'm expecting, being a quadriplegic, being in chronic pain. Almost everyone says, no, it's how I'm treated by the medical system.
Right. Then nobody.
It's being gaslight. It's being not heard. So they're desperate to have this inquiry so that they can share their voice. It's curious, in Canada, in the freedom community, we're getting a lot of criticism. Well, you guys did the NCI, we're done. We've already heard from the vaccine injured. Well, what are you talking about? When I did the NCI, it was to give these people a voice, and there's more that want to speak. And we should have other initiatives going because these people are desperate to speak.
I have a question from Paul DTN. Actually, let me go to this one more in terms of what you're talking about. Chet Chisholm asks, Shawn, do you have an estimate as to when you will have the finalized list of witnesses?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing, because we know we're going to have people dropping out, right? So we're close now. Like, we probably could run the slate we have now, but we know some are going to drop out, and we know we're going to have travel problems, and we know that some, they're going to travel and not be able to testify because they're sick. So, we're still screening. I, was interviewing a couple of people earlier today. So it's a dynamic process. But if you're not selected to testify, because obviously, the odds are narrowing now as we get close, we still want a written record. So, how it works is on our website, there's an initial form, very easy to fill out, kind of gets you in the gate. And then we send you a more detailed form. Both of those we want to form part of a permanent record. So, like I say, I don't know, we might be at 1,100 right now. Who knows what we'll be at by the time we get there, because this is just, awareness of this is growing. We want a permanent record. We want the written part to form part of the inquiry record, to stand as a testament and give everyone a voice, at least a partial voice. It's not a substitute for testifying, verbally in person, but very early on, we realized that we're being swamped, and somehow we have to give people a voice. So we, put a consent form. Will you consent to this forming part of the record? And almost everyone is consenting.
Fantastic. A question from Paul DTN. Has Shawn represented any of the truckers or their supporters? If so, what happened with their litigation against the government?
And the answer is no, I didn't, although I was asked by some, but I had closed my law practice. I'm still a member of 2 law societies, but I closed my law practice so I could volunteer 3 years full-time at the NCI. Wow. And then, and then we did this charter tour, and now I'm volunteering to put the Allison Inquiry together. So I'm not taking files. So no, I was asked, but I haven't. I've helped some non-truckers on, as an expert witness on COVID issues, but I haven't taken any files, because the reality is, you get involved in a file like that, it's going to be a constitutional thing, and like a couple of files can consume you, and then I'm not able to do this other stuff. So I just made a decision. I think I'm going to have more impact for the country, not practicing and doing these other things. Yeah, I would have loved to have done that. I just think that I have a responsibility elsewhere right now.
Great. There's a question from Stongbad, and I'm going to reframe the question. Did Canada's hospitals get paid extra for positive COVID tests, or for using any of the EUA protocols, such as ventilators, remdesivir, or any of those during the first year or 2 of COVID?
Now, I don't know on the fee thing, and I don't think anyone's analyzed this, but we did the same thing. We did the remdesivir protocols with the bad results and all of that. And if I can just share with you a personal experience. So my mother-in-law was in a care home and got vaccinated. She's on, the day before she died, she was in a wheelchair, but very healthy, very vibrant. She had done wheelchair bowling the day before, and then we get a call in the morning saying, you have to come to the hospital. She's basically going to die today. And she wasn't there. So I don't know if she, had a stroke or a massive heart attack and they didn't revive her soon enough, but we're basically there from the morning till about 10:30 at night when she died. And we're just watching her vitals go down all day. They're not doing any intervention. So they're telling us clearly, we're not doing anything. We are not doing anything. And this woman does not have COVID. Like, was bowling the day before. We're just waiting for her to die. I bet you it is 30 times at least that we had to tell them, don't do a COVID test. They just kept coming in. And I even asked a nurse, like, well, how long after the person dies can you do a COVID test? And we stayed with the body until well past that, so that they couldn't call her a COVID death. So for sure, there was huge pressure for them to try and get any positive PCR they could so they could do a count. But we're socialist medicine here. So the hospitals, they get paid by the provinces. I can't even tell you province to province, do they get paid more for certain procedures or not? It's hard to know, and I'm not aware of anyone who crunched it, but we acted just like the US hospitals. So we wanted to say you died of COVID if we could possibly say you had COVID. And we did the remdesivir. I mean, I personally know a lady that, you know, went to the hospital not in distress, that they put on remdesivir, and she's one of the few that survived. But for a long time afterwards, you know, she's got the oxygen bottle with her and that she's fine now. So we had the train wreck, maybe even more of a train wreck than you, but I don't know about the costing. That's a great question. I would love to know.
Yeah, interesting with the socialized medicine. It's hard to find the incentives for the hospitals to get the positive test like they did in the US.
But like public health funding used to be based on, you had to have a certain amount of the population vaccinated and your budget went up. So we know that people in organizations get incentivized with money. So I fully expect that there was some incentive there. I just don't know anyone that's analyzed it and, you know, really looked at the billing codes. And somebody may have, and I'm just not aware of it.
Yeah. Well, Shawn, thank you so much for the work you're doing and bringing this to light in Canada and for the world. How can our viewers and followers follow you and the Allison Inquiry?
Okay. So the website's actually covidtestimony.com, but if you do an internet search for AllisonInquiry.com, it will get you there. And we're going to be live streaming. And we're going to have some American experts there. We start on the morning of September 8th at 8:30 Eastern time. And I assure you, you want to watch in the morning on September 8th. We're not telling you why. But it doesn't matter, American, Canadian, we're the same culture. You're going to see some precious people that have suffered terribly telling their stories, and you will not be the same ever again. So, you know, that's where you'll be able to catch us live streaming, and our social media is there. So if you subscribe to our social media or our newsletter, we will make it very easy for you to know how to follow the event, how to watch, and certainly would appreciate, everyone watching and and if you're like a podcaster. So here's the thing. We don't care that you're American because we want you to live stream and we want you to be there. So normally in a parliamentary committee room, only the mainstream media can attend. But MP Dean Allison can have anyone he wants as a guest. So we're allowing alternative media. Steve, if you want to come and be there and live stream, we're going to have some pretty hot witnesses that will be available to interview, both experts and lay witnesses. So so I'm formally inviting you to come and attend. You just have to tell us in advance who's coming, so we put you on the list. You have to go through parliamentary security every day to get in the building. But we'll have live streams there that you can plug into, and both in French and English, because we've got a parliamentary committee room and we're a bilingual country. It'll be streamed in 2 languages.
Nice.
Fantastic. I've been informed that VSRF is going to try to live stream it as well on the VSRF Rumble channel.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you guys are going to compete with me, huh?
That's right. As many eyeballs.
Well, we people telling their stories, there's something about it. Like we learned that with the NCI. There's something about it. So, and you guys have, cool. Steve, you have such a big footprint. It would be huge to have you there.
Great.
That is a covidtestimony.com. Thank you for being here tonight, Shawn, and we wish you all the best on the inquiry, and that it actually moves the needle, especially not just in Canada, but everywhere.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. You guys do such good work and you're such champions. I'm just honored to be on your show. So thank you.
Wrap up how it went. All right. Thank you, Shawn. Everyone hang in there. I have an announcement to make, Steve, actually.